Aaron's children brought what was called strange fire, and then they died. Aaron's response was, Vayidom Aharon. The Ramban, Nachmanides' 13th century commentator, says that Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent, actually means, no, he cried aloud. And then he became silent. He had nothing left in him. He was so distraught. Abarvanel, a little bit later commentary, Spain, Vayidon Aharon, his heart turned lifeless, domem, to stone, to mineral. He did not weep or mourn. He didn't accept anyone's consolation. His soul left him. He was like a rock, speechless. And a modern rabbi, Rabbi Baruch Levine, modern conservative rabbi, says that actually the root zamam means to moan or to mourn. So it doesn't mean silent. What we know is that anytime there is a tragic death, there's difficulty in responding. If any of you have experienced a tragic death in your family or friend circle, you know, ein milim, there are no words. And that's what seems to go on right now, or at least what I felt, my short trip to Israel this last week. I am no more of an expert than any one of you who has been, and many of you have been. But I will share with you some reflections of my week, 5 days with the rabbinic cabinet of Magen David Adom. When our trip wasn't able to go, I needed to find a trip where I could go and feel like I was doing something using some of my skills, and also an organization that was not political, that is not political. And so Magen David Adom fit that for me. They're the people who get the blood. They're the people who are the rescue squad people. And I learned they also keep a national bank of breast milk, which sadly, on October 8th, was used greatly because many mothers had been killed. My dear friend and former student is now one of the associate deans at the Schechter Rabbinical School in Jerusalem, wrote about this week, Rabbi Ari Chassid. Aaron's silence after his son's death is perhaps a reflection of exactly that, of that there is not much wisdom in death. There's just death and the hardness of having to understand it. He writes, "We carry the pain of every Israeli Jew, Christian and Muslim. We and they also carry the deaths of everyone in Gaza with us as well. We saw terrible things happen in the war, and we saw terrible things this week when aid workers were killed. It is terrible. Israelis agree that it should be avoided. Of course, who doesn't agree with that? Aaron was silent after the deaths, but not forever. He eventually regains his voice and finds a way to instruct the people on how to behave, how to move forward. So I felt good about joining the Rabbinic Advisory Committee of Magen David Adom because they are just trying to help some people move forward. They serve all. Also, I would be with loving, caring colleagues and some lay people. So I will say any trip that you can go on now is important for the Israelis. And I say Israelis and not Jewish people because we ended up sitting with quite a number of Christian and Muslim Israelis. So if you can go, go. Be a witness. Hear stories. Spend money in the economy that needs it. Every single person we encountered, from the bus drivers to the bus boys to the members of the Knesset that we met, thanked us so deeply and said, thank you for coming during a time of war. You don't know how much it means to us. Here are some of the highlights of our itinerary, and then I'm just going to explain one day. We'll have more time to talk about it another time. We went to see the National Blood Center. It is in the south. It was supposed to open on the 19th or 20th of October, but it opened early on the 8th of October. It took 6 years to build. It is deep 40 meters under the ground so that it is protected. We visited with Natal, the National Trauma Center. We met with the Director General of Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, the largest hospital in Jerusalem and the one that gets, still today, a lot of wounded. We went to Hashtig Square, which I'm sure many of you have been to now. We saw the art installations, but mostly we sat with the people in the tents there. People who've lost loved ones and people who still have hostages. We met with the parents of Adi Vital Kaplan, a young woman who was slain on Kibbutz Cholit. Her children survived, as did her husband. We had a meeting with the U.S. Charge d'Affaires, Stephanie Hallett. But let me tell you just about my day in the South. Early that day, I had breakfast with our friends, the Feldsteins. They were going on a different route in the South. We were all a little nervous and a little jet-lagged. We met with Stephanie Hallett, the Charge d'Affaires. She was supposed to meet with us the night before, but it had to be changed because she was on the phone with President Biden. I guess that's a good excuse. Stephanie is not Jewish. She's originally from Florida, and she is career foreign service. She loves her post, and she loves that her young daughter and husband love living in Israel. She said that she was the first from the American government to go to the South, and that she has never, in her 25 years of working in the Foreign Service, seen the atrocities that she saw. She said to us, make no mistake. The people that the Israelis are fighting, Hamas, want Israelis gone. They also want Westerners gone. That the United States will continue in whatever way it can to help. And it's complicated, as we all saw this week. We then got on the bus for the 2-hour drive to kibbutz Nir Oz. Nir Oz was one of the kibbutzim affected. Let me tell you about the place before. It's a Hashomer Tza'ir kibbutz, so far left politically. They grow vegetables. They are into peace. Many people who live in Kfar Oz would go back and forth and take people from Gaza to hospitals in Israel when they needed treatment, but also had relationship with people in Gaza. They were what you called in the peace camp. We had 3 guides. One, our main guide, is the head of education on the kibbutz, a history teacher. She has 2 kids and a husband. She showed us her house. I put pictures of it on Facebook for you to see. It's burned, totally. She thinks she and her family are alive because A friend of theirs had given them a lock a couple months earlier to lock their safe room from the inside. They had never thought of that before because usually it's about missiles falling and not about someone coming in and trying to kill you. So she said for 12 hours, her husband and she took turns holding the door closed to the safe room. She heard and saw the houses around her being invaded by terrorists and then having flammable material thrown in the houses. They are mostly burned. She talked about being at the other side of the kibbutz where most of the elders lived and watching as children gathered there to see who had survived and counting one after another of who didn't. As we walked around the kibbutz for 2.5 hours, we saw their kitchen that had just been rehabilitated, redone. Shiputzim were done on it, but it is now all broken glass. And at that point, we read Bialik's poem that he wrote in response to the Kishinev pogrom. 47 people were killed during the Kishinev pogrom in Kishinev. On October 7th, 49 people were killed at Merow's. The poem is called The City of Slaughter. Safe rooms, she said, are made against bombs, not invaders. They waited for 10, 12 hours. Throughout the trip, we heard people from Magen David Adom tell us time after time, we failed. We failed to get there in time. Army people said, we failed. I heard a story when we were at Magen David Adom, and then I heard it again on the kibbutz. The dispatch station for Magen David Adom in Lachish was overrun, and so all the calls got directed to the Jerusalem dispatch station. The army was calling Magen David Adom to find out what was going on. This is what the dispatchers did. Usually, they are used to staying on the phone. When you call 911, right here, they'll stay on the phone until the ambulance gets there, right? They said 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. But here, it would be 10 or 12 hours. And so they tried to stay on the phone. They brought extra workers into the dispatch. Also, Natal, the National Trauma Center, sent their trauma workers to the dispatch center so that every hour, the dispatchers would leave for 10 minutes and sit with a therapist because there was no way to actually help the people on these kibbutzim. The 3 middle-aged people who showed us around their kibbutz did so in tears, but they kept thanking us because they said, we want to tell our story because we don't think people hear it anymore. They think we only hear in the West about the retaliation. So thank you for coming. They showed us where the terrorists came in and how they looted their homes. There are still many from that kibbutz who are hostage. We hugged. We said some El Maleh prayers with them. We left. We went then for lunch with a unit of soldiers. I snuck away and helped cook for a little. And then we sat and were paired with groups of soldiers. They oddly kept thanking us again. We kept saying, no, tell us about your life. So one young man I sat with, Sephardi, had never met a Reform or a conservative rabbi. He was happy to know that those things existed. We took a picture of the 3 of us. He told us that while he was in Gaza fighting, his commander let him go out for a day, and it was the day that his wife would deliver their 6th child. He got to the hospital 1 hour before the baby was born and was there in his fatigues and gun, welcoming his new baby, Nerya, light of God. They just looked tired. Everyone looked so tired. That brief, lovely lunch with these beautiful soldiers reminded us that they are worn out. They are fatigued. And they are also full of grit. They've all experienced loss, either in their units or someone they know. And it's difficult, they said, for them to be there. They don't want civilian deaths. Then we got on the bus for the worst part of the day. We went to the Nova spot, to the music festival. We were honored to meet Chaim. Chaim is a religious man who is in charge of the relationship between Zaka and the army. Zaka is Roshei Tevot, is abbreviation for those who identify bodies and body parts and make sure all the body parts are collected and buried. Chaim had been in Miami at Surfside, helping in that terrible tragedy. From Guy, he said to his wife when the alarms kept going off that morning, "Pack me a bag. This doesn't seem right." It was funny to watch him in his black velvet kippah while he was vaping a little. He needed a little bit of something to calm him down. He said that he now comes to this site 3 times a week on his own time to meet with outside groups because he wants people to hear what happened. That day, he got a call from his person in the army to say, "How many bodies can you fit in an ambulance?" He said, "I don't know, we never asked that question." So they tried. And the guy from the army said that won't be enough. So they called one of the food distributors and got refrigerated trucks. He and his people got there at 9 p.m. at night, when the army had maybe taken away, thought it was safe enough. The army, he said, made a perimeter around so that they could work to get all the bodies. What were they worried about? They were worried that the bodies would be taken into Gaza for ransom. They wanted them all collected. He and his workers collected 250 bodies from 9 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning. The army said, "Please, you must get it done by daylight because we are worried there are still terrorists in the trees." So we did. Benny Gantz, member of Knesset, walked over to see who was this group and then started talking to us. And then there was this very elegantly dressed woman with a beautiful religious head covering on, walking with her husband in a suit jacket, odd for Israel in the South. They were walking back and forth and they kept trying to listen, and so they came over. What we found out from them is they come every week. This is where their son died. They were religious, their son was not. He wasn't at the musical festival to dance. He was part of the stage crew. He had set the stage up. He had gone home to sleep at night and come back early in the morning. It was the first time they met Chaim. And it was the first time they told their story. So they told their story to us and we wept. Then we walked around with them and with others to the many, they're not graves because that's not where the bodies are, but memorials. A little area of stones with a stake in the ground with a picture of the deceased, and then all kinds of memorabilia that the families put in yahrzeit candles. There were so many of them, so many families there to tend to the graves. And our job was to just go and stand and see if they needed help or if they wanted to tell us about their loved one. We just listened. That was one day, not the whole day. Here's some remembrances from Kibbutz Oz that they said to us. There were 117 killed or kidnapped that day from the kibbutz, of a little over 400. There are still 37 from their kibbutz kidnapped. 10 they know are not alive. Their houses are ruined. The army didn't get there in time to save any of them. The smell on the kibbutz, they said, would be everywhere because things were all burnt and rotten, and it was. They said, we are still living October 7th because the hostages are still there. They said that they entered the kibbutz in 4 different places, and they left from 5 because they found the cemetery and desecrated the graves there. They estimated that there were 150 Hamas terrorists and then another 160 to 70 other people who came in to loot. They are a Hashomer HaTzair kibbutz, the peace-loving liberals. They don't know what to do now with their ideology. They talk about utter devastation, and they talk about the trauma that they're still feeling. Kibbutz Nir Oz is where the Bibas family lived, and so we saw their house. Here are some takeaways for me, my own. You'll come to your own conclusions, and I'll need time to think and write. It is not just wounded people, it is a wounded country. Wounded but resilient. Many say there's no such thing as PTSD for them anymore. The D, the disorder, is being replaced by an R, resilience, post-traumatic stress resilience. They said the verse several times, Lo tov liot adam levado, from the Torah. It's not good for a person to be alone. And they feel that when Jews from outside of Israel come and visit them, they are not alone. Many people I encountered, my own family there and maybe yours, say they are dealing with anger. Anger at their government, anger at the army, anger at the intelligence services, anger at those on the far left, and anger at those on the far right. Anger at themselves for feeling okay. They feel sad and impatient with the world's impatience with Israel. One big trauma. And then we met other people, like the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, who says, I see light. There's got to be light in this. This feels like an existential crisis, but we'll rebuild. We'll rebuild a different ideology. We'll rebuild with the many, many Arab Israelis who actually didn't join that day in the fighting and haven't. This is not, at this point for me or you, a political debate. Right now, this is about peoplehood. How can we be there for our brothers and sisters in supportive, loving ways? I was down south the day that Riva and Barak were at Kibbutz Cholit, so I'll go to Cholit this summer. This is about trauma that is so raw. This is about people not being fully functional, and then they turned to us and they said, Rabbis, we think you're probably not fully functional either. And we all said, yes, that's true. He said something to Heidi that first day. I don't know if she remembers it. I said, we were standing over there. Everything is different from today on. This is the first war where it's civilians that were attacked. This is the war that seems like it will get worse in the coming days and weeks. About an existential threat. For Israelis that I spoke with, it felt different than Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur was short. We are now 6 months into this. Lo tov liot adam levado. What can I do from afar? What can you do from afar? Make sure your family and friends there, and they're all our family and friends, even if you don't have family there, the whole Jewish people is our family. Don't feel alone. Do what you can do. Be part of our Twinning Sister Shul program. Give to the charities that you feel are helping. Go, and then go again. And more importantly than all, at another time I'll speak with you about the 2 meetings that we had, one with David Horowitz, the editor of Times of Israel, and with the gentleman who is head of psychological services for the Mossad, who debriefed all the hostages. At another time, we'll think about what it means for us to be ambassadors and to read the news. Don't always read the news and think it's right. Read multiple news sources. Anyway, it says in the Parsha, Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent, and I should be silent now because there's more processing. But with that silence, I'll say I'm so glad that we as a congregation have come together on so many occasions, early in the war, later, to try to provide support. I feel for each one of you, and I'm going to say this, it's going to be odd, I feel more for those who are politically on the left of Israeli politics, because the folks on the left of Israeli politics there are the ones who are throwing their hands up and saying, oh my goodness, this is not what we thought, and are having to rebuild ideologies and figure out how to rebuild paths toward peace. And I feel bad for the folks on the right, equally, because they thought the government that we had was able to take care, and it wasn't there. It failed, and the army. And I feel so bad for the ones in the middle who don't want to protest, just want this all to end. I feel bad for all of us because everyone here knows someone, or knows someone who knows someone. And because we need to make sure that this doesn't continue to be an existential threat to the state of Israel. Thank you for allowing me the week to be away. I look forward to more processing, and I look forward to our community going, to each of you going, and to finding ways to make sure our loved ones in Israel do not feel alone, to make sure they feel supported here, to make sure we are advocates, to remember that when Hamas came in, they said, we want to destroy this place. And this is only the first time. They are not looking for a 2 or 1 state solution. They are looking for a solution that does not include Jews. So we'll have to find other Palestinians to work with to create peace. We'll have to find the strength to help our loved ones, to hold the sadness of seeing people in Gaza die, to hold the sadness of seeing our own people die. May Pesach come and bring us freedom, and may Pesach come and bring all our hostages freedom. Shabbat Shalom.